Chapter 91. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first time, Chen Ye went to the hospital to visit Harry and Peter early in the morning. When he walked into the ward, the first thing that caught his eye was Peter's energetic figure. As expected of a teenager who got the spider gene, after a night of recuperation, he has fully recovered his vitality, like a spider that has just transformed, ready to go. He laughed and played with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and his optimism and tenacity were touching, however. When Chen Ye turned his eyes to Harry, he saw his lonely and envious expression. He sat quietly on the bed, watching the interaction between Peter and Aunt May, with a hint of complex emotions flashing in his eyes. Maybe at this moment, he thought of his father Osborne. Chen Ye walked to Harry's side and patted him on the shoulder gently. He noticed Harry's expression and knew the struggle and desire in the boy's heart, so he gently comforted him. "It's okay, Harry, everything will be fine. You still have Peter and us." Harry raised his head, tears flashing in his eyes. He looked at Chen Ye, as if he saw hope. Just then, Chen Ye took out a belt and a USB flash drive from his pocket and handed them to Harry. Harry took the belt and USB flash drive, his eyes full of surprise and confusion. Chen Ye explained lightly, "This belt and USB flash drive can turn you into a Kamen Rider. Although I can't give you superpowers, you can use this to protect yourself and the people you want to protect. But please remember, if you use it to do evil, I will never let you go." Harry nodded solemnly. He took the belt and USB flash drive, as if he had taken over a great responsibility. He looked at Chen Ye, his eyes full of determination. "I will definitely use it well, Chen Ye." "Thank you." Peter on the side also noticed it and hurried over. Although he didn't say anything, Peter looked at Chen Ye with eager eyes, as if to say that he also wanted it. Chen Ye said helplessly, "Don't think about it, use your spider ability well, your ability is not weak." His words stunned Peter, and then he nodded slowly. He understood that everyone has his own path and mission, and what he needs to do is to maximize his potential. Then Chen Ye smiled and patted Harry on the shoulder, then turned and left the ward. He knew that this boy had found his direction and goal. He will work hard to become a real hero and protect himself and those around him. At this time, the system panel had a new prompt. "Congratulations to the host, Harry Osborne's favorability has been raised to 5 stars. Congratulations to the host, Harry Osborne's favorability has been raised to full stars. Congratulations to the host, 1620 family members have been summoned." Then Chen Ye used the hanging ring to return to the Good Luck restaurant. As for Deadpool and others, Chen Ye would use his exclusive skills to summon them back later. Chen Ye had just returned to Hell's Kitchen and had just said hello to Aunt May and was about to go out for some fresh air. He heard someone outside the door looking for him, and then the previous scene appeared. Seeing Chen Ye coming back, John Wick and Pietro's eyes lit up. Pietro quickly took out his mobile phone to report the news of Chen Ye's return to his sister. At the same time, the dog Deadpool also jumped up excitedly. Chen Ye smiled and picked it up, saying lovingly, okay, I'll buy you something delicious later." The dog Deadpool seemed to understand Chen Ye's words and licked his cheek happily. Then Chen Ye had time to deal with the man in front of him. "I don't know what your name is, what do you want to see me for?" Crossbones looked at the young man in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He originally thought that Chen Ye would be a fierce and muscular man, but the man in front of him looked so ordinary and even handsome. This made him start to wonder why a powerful person like Master Yi would willingly become Chen Ye's subordinate. However, Crossbones did not reveal his inner thoughts. He stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Hello, my name is Crossbones. I am the captain of the Special Forces from S.H.I.E.L.D., and I came here on the orders of Director Pierce this time." Chen Ye looked at the hand stretched out by Crossbones and shook hands with him with a smile. However, the moment they shook hands, Chen Ye immediately felt the change in Crossbones' hand strength. The power of that hand surged like a tide, as if trying to test his strength and determination. Chen Ye couldn't help but feel a little funny. He understood that Crossbones was trying to test his strength and details. Chen Ye didn't panic or retreat. He quietly endured the power of Crossbones and secretly observed him. He found that although Crossbones was smiling, the strength of his hands did not weaken at all, but became heavier. However, Chen Ye was not afraid of this. On the contrary, a glimmer of challenge flashed in his eyes. Although Chen Ye was not strong, his body contained amazing power. with the superposition of various talents, his strength was enough to compete with the purple potato spirit. At this moment, he was also gradually increasing the strength of his hands, trying to compete with Crossbones. As time went on, Chen Ye gradually felt the changes in Crossbones. He saw that the other party's face turned red, a redness suppressed by power, a redness that could not withstand pressure, and Crossbones' eyes also lost their previous calmness and confidence, replaced by a kind of shock and confusion. Seeing this, Chen Ye smiled and asked, "Do you want to continue shaking hands?" That his voice was relaxed and confident, as if everything was under control. In fact, his question was to test Crossbones, whether he wanted to continue testing his strength. Crossbones took a deep breath, and he knew that he had been completely suppressed by Chen Ye. He slowly uttered a few words, "No, it's okay." There was a hint of helplessness and frustration in his voice, but he also understood that this was his recognition of Chen Ye's strength. "So you want to talk to me on behalf of Hydra?" Chen Ye's voice was low and firm, as if every word contained an unshakable power. When Crossbones heard the name Hydra, his body tensed up instantly, as if he was bound by invisible ropes. His originally relaxed expression became solemn, his brows were furrowed, and his eyes flashed with doubt and uneasiness. This name means too many secrets and dangers to him. "I don't understand what you are talking about." Crossbones tried to stay calm, but his voice revealed an unconcealable tension. He was secretly surprised. Did this man already know his true identity? Did he already know the existence of Hydra? Looking at Crossbones, who was still pretending to be confused, Chen Ye sneered in his heart. He knew that this man was not really unaware, but was just testing his background, so Chen Ye decided to give him an answer that he could not escape. "Long live Hydra," he said softly but firmly, as if swearing an ancient oath. This sentence was like a flash of lightning, instantly piercing the defense line in Crossbones' heart. His face turned pale in an instant, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He looked at Chen Ye in disbelief, as if he saw a messenger from hell. How do you know?" Crossbones' voice trembled, and his heart was filled with fear and uneasiness. He understood that the man in front of him not only knew his name, but also knew his identity, and even knew the mysterious organization he was loyal to. Chapter 92. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two of them were so confused that they had to wait for the next day. "Are you also?" Crossbones looked at Chen Ye in surprise. Chen Ye smiled slightly, as if he saw through Crossbones' thoughts. You must be scared by his aura. He was secretly proud in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He let this Crossbones test him in front of him, and wanted to give him a head start. Chen Ye gently pushed open the door of the restaurant and made a gesture to invite Crossbones in. His voice was gentle and polite. "Please. You can't just stand here and chat all the time." Then he turned and walked into the restaurant. Crossbones looked at Chen Ye's back and couldn't help but hesitate. However, he quickly suppressed his composure and followed him in. Inside the restaurant, the lights were soft and the atmosphere was peaceful. Chen Ye looked directly at Crossbones, his voice calm and firm. "Tell me what you want, Mr. Crossbones. You Hydra wouldn't come to me for no reason, right?" His words revealed a kind of confidence, as if everything was under control. Crossbones looked at Chen Ye, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. He originally thought that the meeting would be more complicated, requiring some courtesy and probing, but Chen Ye's directness caught him off guard. However, such direct conversations are exactly what Crossbones likes. He appreciates men with courage and people who can face the exchange of interests honestly. Crossbones adjusted his sitting posture and said seriously, "I am indeed here on behalf of Director Pierce to invite you to join Hydra. You should know that Hydra is an organization with strong strength and resources." Chen Ye nodded slightly. He knew that Hydra did have strength and influence that could not be underestimated. Chen Ye did not refuse immediately, but said lightly, "What benefits you can bring to me is what I care about most. Please let me know your sincerity first." Although Chen Ye did not intend to join any organization, he was very curious about what Hydra could offer him. Crossbones took a deep breath and began to explain their proposal in detail. "First, we can provide you with financial support, whether it is your personal life or the construction of public facilities in Hell's Kitchen. You can get funding from Hydra. Secondly, the schools and hospitals in Hell's Kitchen do need to be improved, and we can provide you with the necessary resources and technical support to make them look brand new." Hearing this, Chen Ye's heart was shaken. He really didn't need money, but the public facilities in Hell's Kitchen were indeed a pain in his heart. If Hydra could help improve these conditions, it would undoubtedly be a good thing for him. However, Chen Ye did not agree immediately, but continued to ask, "So, what price do I need to pay?" Crossbones solemnly replied, "Join us and become a member of Hydra. When necessary, we need you to help us." Hearing this, Chen Ye refused without hesitation. "I refuse." Crossbones was surprised to hear this answer. He stood up and his tone became serious. "You have to think clearly, Chen Ye. You already know our identity. If you refuse us, you will face the pursuit of Hydra all over the world." However, Chen Ye was not shaken by the threat. He smiled and said, "Don't be so anxious, Crossbones. Although I can't join you, it doesn't mean that we can't cooperate." Chen Ye's word surprised Crossbones. He didn't expect Chen Ye to make such a suggestion, but he soon realized that this might be a better choice, so he sat down again and prepared to listen to how Chen Ye would cooperate. Chen Ye continued, "I guess you investigated me before you came. Don't you want a transformation device like Kamen Rider? You mean you want to give it to us?" Crossbones' eyes lit up when he heard it. If he could transform into Kamen Rider, Crossbones would not be afraid of anyone. Chen Ye shook his head, "Not at the moment, because I only have one set." Crossbones was furious when he heard it. He thought Chen Ye was playing tricks on him. He only had one set and he still brought it out. Wasn't he deliberately teasing him? "Don't worry. Although I can't give you my set, the organization behind me will give me a few sets in a while. Then I can decide to give Hydra 1 or 2 sets." Chen Ye decided to make up an organization. He knew that the secret of the system could not be leaked to the outside world, and there was someone behind it. A powerful organization can not only divert Hydra's attention, but also make Hydra no longer focus on Chen Ye and Hell's Kitchen. After listening to Chen Ye's words, Crossbones thought to himself that there was indeed a powerful organization behind Chen Ye. And Chen Ye's status in this organization was not low, otherwise he could get several powerful transformation belts like this one, and he could make his own decisions. "I wonder if you can introduce the organization behind you." "I wonder what the name of this organization is," Crossbones asked tentatively. Chen Ye was stunned when he heard Crossbones' question. He made up an organization casually, so how could he know the name? After thinking for a while, he said, "The organization behind me is called Consortium X. They are all a group of scientists who don't care about the world, so I usually come forward to purchase the necessary supplies on their behalf." Crossbones nodded after listening, and silently wrote down the organization of Consortium X. If they can find Consortium X, they can also strive to be their agent. After all, Hydra is much more advantageous than Chen Ye. "Then I'll take my leave first. If you have a transformation device, remember to contact me. This is my phone number." Crossbones handed out a business card and left in a hurry. "No, help me renovate the hospital first," Chen Ye said as he looked at Crossbones who was leaving in a hurry. "Shield." Crossbones hurried into Director Pierce's office and reported in detail what Chen Ye had told him with a serious face. He described in detail the Consortium X mentioned by Chen Ye and the high-tech power they possessed, especially the information about Kamen Rider, which made Director Pierce's eyes light up. Director Pierce sat behind his desk, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. As if thinking about some important decision, he took a deep breath, and then slowly said, "So the force behind Chen Ye is called Consortium X." His voice was full of seriousness and depth. This Consortium X was so mysterious and had such high-tech power, which shocked Director Pierce. He secretly decided in his heart that he must take control of the power of this Consortium X. In this way, the power of Hydra will be even stronger, and it may even surpass all hostile forces. Suddenly, Director Pierce opened his eyes and looked at Crossbones with a sharp gaze. "Chen Ye already knows the identity of our Hydra, right?" There was a trace of unquestionable firmness in his voice. Crossbones nodded, and a helpless expression appeared on his face. He knew that Chen Ye already knew the existence of Hydra, which was undoubtedly a huge threat to them. Director Pierce smiled slightly, and a sly smile appeared on his face. "Since he doesn't join us, let's send our Winter Soldier." His voice was full of confidence and decisiveness. However, Crossbones frowned. Winter Soldier may not be Chen Ye's opponent. There was a trace of worry and uneasiness in his words. After all, He himself had suffered at the hands of Chen Ye, and he knew how powerful Chen Ye was. If the Winter Soldier couldn't even beat him, then he certainly couldn't beat Chen Ye. Director Pierce looked at Crossbones' frown and smiled slightly. Who said I would send the Winter Soldier to kill Chen Ye? Chen Ye doesn't care much about friends and family, so I sent the Winter Soldier to capture Kingpin's family for me. His voice was full of cunning and insidiousness. After listening to Director Pierce's words, Crossbones suddenly realized he understood Director Pierce's intention. It turned out that he wanted to use Kingpin's family to threaten Chen Ye and let him hand over the contact information of the transformation device and the forces behind him. In this way, they can control the power of Consortium X and further enhance the strength of Hydra. Director Pierce looked at Crossbones and understood his intentions, and nodded with satisfaction. He reminded again, you continue to contact Chen Ye, and don't let people know that we kidnapped Kingpin. Do it cleanly. His voice was full of seriousness and warning. After listening, Crossbones suddenly realized and then went out to execute the order. Chapter 93. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first time, the second time, Hell's Kitchen, Good Luck Restaurant. Chen Ye sat in the corner of the restaurant, quietly waiting for his friends. Today, he specially invited Kingpin, Tony and others to have dinner together, and there was another important purpose, which was to introduce them to the two newcomers, Dr. Octopus and Sandman. The lights in the restaurant were soft and warm, reflecting the expectation on Chen Ye's face. During this period, the restaurant's business has become more and more prosperous, and the chef team has gradually grown, so Chen Ye no longer needs to cook by himself. Tonight, he can sit here leisurely and wait for his friends to arrive. Just then, familiar footsteps came from the door. Chen Ye looked up and saw Wanda walked in. Her outfit caught Chen Ye's eye. She was dressed in an OL outfit, simple and elegant, and with the gold-rimmed glasses, she looked even more extraordinary, as if a domineering female president had arrived. However, what surprised Chen Ye was that Wanda was accompanied by a little girl. She looked about 13 or 14 years old, dressed simply, and nervously grabbed Wanda's clothes. Obviously afraid of the unfamiliar environment, Chen Ye looked at the little girl curiously and couldn't help asking Wanda, "Who is this little girl?" Wanda gently touched the little girl's head. A trace of tenderness flashed in her eyes, and explained to Chen Ye, "Her name is Jessica Jones. Her family had a car accident and was adopted by a pervert. This little guy seems to have superpowers. Not long ago, a guy with a purple body controlled this little girl to come to Fisk Building to cause trouble for us, and I beat him away. This little guy is also very pitiful. His family died and he was controlled by others. I was soft-hearted and adopted him. You are still the guardian. Chen Ye. I don't think I am old enough." Perhaps Wanda herself has experienced the death of both parents, so when she saw this little girl, she thought of herself. If she hadn't met Chen Ye, she might be controlled by others like this little girl. So Wanda decided to take in this little girl. After listening to Wanda's explanation, Chen Ye looked at Jessica Jones in surprise. It was another superhero from Hell's Kitchen. The guy with purple all over his body must be the Purple Man. Chen Ye suddenly felt that this place was a shelter, and all kinds of people were stuffed into him. Chen Ye stood up, walked to Jessica, and smiled and stretched out his hand. "Hello, Jessica. I am Chen Ye, welcome here." His voice was gentle and powerful, as if it could dispel all fear and anxiety. Jessica raised her head and looked at Chen Ye carefully. Although she was still a little scared, Chen Ye's smile and voice made her feel a little warm and comforted. She hesitated for a moment, then gently held Chen Ye's hand. Chen Ye said to Wanda, "Then did you kill the Purple Man? That guy with purple all over his body?" After listening to Chen Ye's words, Wanda tried hard to recall the previous battle. She frowned, thought for a while, and then said, "I didn't care at the time. I knocked him down and went to check on the little guy. However, even if he didn't die, he should have broken an arm." Her words revealed disdain for the Purple Man. Chen Ye didn't care too much when he heard that the Purple Man was not dead. After all, although the Purple Man has some troublesome abilities, his strength is not strong. The body of the Purple Man is changed by some chemical hormones. Once these hormones are absorbed by the skin, people can be controlled by the Purple Man's words. However, for those with strong willpower, they can break free from the control of the Purple Man. For example, Kingpin once got rid of the control of the Purple Man. Despite this, Chen Ye still plans to find a time to completely kill the Purple Man. He believes that cutting the grass and eradicating the roots is the hard truth, so that the threat brought by the Purple Man can be completely eliminated. Then let this little guy stay here and go to school with Peter and the others. Chen Ye suddenly said. A hint of evil taste flashed in his eyes. Children still have to play with children. His words surprised Jessica and Wanda. After all, Jessica and Peter were high school classmates in the movie story itself. Now Chen Ye just brought him forward. Maybe there will be some sparks. Chen Ye is now Jessica's guardian, and Chen Ye will never allow Jessica to marry a black man. Just when Chen Ye and Wanda were chatting, Tony and Kingpin's family just happened to come in. Seeing Chen Ye and Wanda playing with Jessica warmly, after seeing the scene, Tony couldn't help but teased, "Wow, you've only been out for a month, and you already have a child." His words caused laughter from the people around him. King Bing and Vanessa looked at Chen Ye with relief. Wanda blushed when she heard it, stood up and quickly walked to Vanessa to act coquettishly. "I don't have one, this is my newly adopted little girl, and she is also very miserable." Then she told the King Bing couple about Jessica's life experience. It was the first time that Richard saw someone of his age, and he took the initiative to walk over and start chatting with Jessica. The two children soon became good friends, playing games and sharing stories together. Tony stepped forward. "How come you have time to ask me out for dinner today, you know? I'm not particularly interested in Chinese food, I would rather eat cheeseburgers." Tony didn't expect Chen Ye to invite him to dinner. After all, he was very busy recently, upgrading his armor and dealing with the affairs of the Stark Group. Chen Ye hurriedly pulled Dr. Octopus over and introduced him to Tony. "This is Dr. Otto. He comes from a parallel universe that is completely different from ours. He is also a leader in the field of physics and has many amazing research results." He looked at Dr. Otto curiously and found that his eyes also flashed with a desire for knowledge and curiosity about the unknown world. "Dr. Otto, this is Tony Stark. He is one of the smartest people in our world. I believe you must have a lot of common topics." Chen Ye introduced Dr. Otto again. Tony couldn't help feeling a little proud when he heard Chen Ye's praise for him, but he quickly suppressed this emotion and changed to a more professional attitude. He extended his hand to Dr. Otto and said with a smile, "Nice to meet you, Doctor. I believe we can find new inspiration and breakthroughs from each other's research." Dr. Otto also shook Tony's hand enthusiastically. With excitement flashing in his eyes, the two began to talk, and their topics expanded from their respective research results to the discussion of the entire field of physics. Chen Ye watched the two chatting enthusiastically and felt very relieved. At this moment, Chen Ye noticed that Jean Bing had come over and sat next to Chen Ye. Jean Bing looked at Chen Ye and said with a smile, "Boy, it seems that your journey was quite smooth. Hell's Kitchen is also doing well now." Chen Ye smiled and responded, "You are in charge of Hell's Kitchen. I heard that you have become the principal. It seems that you have a comfortable retirement life." Jean Bing laughed, patted Chen Ye on the shoulder and said, "You should go to the school, after all, they are also curious about the founder of the school." Chen Ye nodded and then took out a devil fruit from somewhere. He handed it to Jean Bing and said, "Uncle Jean Bing, this is what I brought you." Jean Bing looked at the fruit with strange patterns and asked curiously, "What is this?" Chen Ye smiled mysteriously and explained, "This is called a devil fruit. Eating it can give you superpowers. And this fruit is called a shining fruit. After eating it, you can have a body as hard as a diamond." Jean Bing's eyes widened, and he looked at the devil fruit in Chen Ye's hand in disbelief. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The old man was very happy. Jean Bing took a puff of his cigar and slowly exhaled a stream of smoke, as if thinking about life. He looked at the devil fruit in his hand, which was flashing with an attractive light. Although this fruit was indeed very useful to him, Jean Bing thought of Chen Ye first. He took a deep breath, looked at Chen Ye, and said, "This fruit is so powerful, why don't you eat it yourself? I'm a retired old man now, and I don't need it." There was a hint of firmness in Jean Bing's words. As if he had made a decision, Chen Ye felt a warm current in his heart when he heard Jean Bing's words. He didn't expect that when faced with such an attractive ability, Uncle Jean Bing would choose to refuse without hesitation. but gave this opportunity to himself. He knew that this was Uncle Jin Bing's trust and love for him. However, Chen Ye did not accept this proposal. He shook his head and said to Jin Bing seriously, "I have enough abilities, uncle. This fruit is specially for you. With it, you can better protect Vanessa and others. The enemies I may provoke in the future will only become stronger and stronger. I can't let you get hurt." Jin Bing looked at Chen Ye's firm eyes and was silent for a while. He knew that Chen Ye was telling the truth, and Chen Ye would definitely encounter stronger enemies in the future, and if his ability was insufficient, he would probably become a burden to Chen Ye. So, he stopped being hypocritical, picked up the devil fruit, and took a bite. Chen Ye looked at Uncle Jin Bing biting off the devil fruit without hesitation, and his heart was instantly filled with tension. He knew the reputation of the devil fruit, and the indescribable taste made many people stay away, so he couldn't help but reach out to stop him and said, "Don't eat so much, it's unpalatable." However, Uncle Jin Bing didn't seem to hear his warning, and chewed the devil fruit in his mouth expressionlessly. He chewed it a few times and then swallowed it, as if it was not something difficult to swallow, but an ordinary fruit. This surprised Chen Ye very much. He widened his eyes and wondered if he had taken the wrong fruit. "Do you want to eat the whole thing?" Uncle Jin Bing looked at Chen Ye and asked lightly. Chen Ye was stunned for a moment, then replied, "No, just take a bite." He couldn't help but ask again, "Isn't this fruit unpalatable?" Uncle Jin Bing heard that he only needed to take a bite, so he put down the devil fruit in his hand. He took a puff of the cigar, and then said melancholy, "When I was a child, I ate things that were 100 times more unpalatable than this in order to survive. This is Hell's Kitchen." Hearing Uncle Jin Bing's words, Chen Ye was silent. He understood why Uncle Jin Bing could eat the devil fruit without any expression, because to him, it was nothing at all. This man who lived in a place called Hell's Kitchen had eaten countless unimaginable things to survive. In comparison, what was the taste of the devil fruit? At this moment, Pietro on the side noticed this strange fruit. He walked over curiously, looked at Chen Ye and Uncle Jin Bing, and then asked, "What kind of fruit is this? I've seen it for the first time." Neither Chen Ye nor Uncle Jin Bing spoke, just looking at Pietro. Pietro looked at their expressions and felt a little strange, but he still decided to try this strange fruit. So he also took a bite, and then the unpalatable devil fruit made his expression instantly distorted. Pietro quickly threw away the devil fruit in his hand, rinsing his mouth and complaining, "Pooh, pooh, pooh, what kind of fruit is this? It's too unpalatable." Chen Ye looked at Pietro's expression, smiled and nodded. This is the reaction of a normal person eating a devil fruit. Chen Ye turned to Uncle Jin Bing and said, "Uncle, feel your new ability." Uncle Jin Bing closed his eyes silently after hearing what Chen Ye said. A faint smile appeared on his face, as if he was expecting something. His body began to tremble slightly, as if a powerful force was surging in his body. Uncle Jin Bing's body slowly changed. Half of his body gradually turned into a crystal-clear diamond, and the other half remained normal. The diamond shone brightly under the light, attracting everyone's attention. Vanessa, Tony, and others came up and curiously observed this strange phenomenon. "Dad, how did you turn into a diamond?" Richard asked curiously, his eyes full of admiration and pride for his father. He felt that his father had become even cooler and more powerful. Tony and Dr. Octopus also carefully observed the diamond-turned Uncle Jin Bing, their faces full of shock and disbelief. Tony asked Chen Ye with a shocked look on his face, "Is this your ability again?" He really couldn't believe that Uncle Jin Bing, who was obviously just an ordinary person in his investigation, actually had the superpower of turning into a diamond. Could it be that unpalatable fruit just now? Pietro also asked curiously. He picked up the devil fruit thrown aside and observed it carefully. He thought that he would have such an ability if he took a bite, so he closed his eyes and began to feel it. Chen Ye looked at the surprised expressions of the crowd and smiled without explaining. He took out a knife and said to Uncle Jin Bing, "Try the strength first." Then he casually slashed at Uncle Jin Bing. With a clang, the diamondized Uncle Jin Bing was unharmed, but the knife broke into 2 pieces. Uncle Jin Bing looked at the scene with satisfaction, and then said, "I feel that bullets are useless to me now, and my diamondized strength has been strengthened." He felt as if he had become stronger and indestructible, and could even kill his previous self with a flicker of his hand. Pietro slowly opened his eyes. with a gleam of loss in his eyes, he looked at Chen Ye and asked with a hint of expectation, "Are there any other devil fruits? I want to eat one too." There was a hint of desire and curiosity in his voice. Tony listened to the conversation between the two people on the side. Frowning, he felt that the concept of devil fruit had gone beyond the scope of science, so he turned to Chen Ye and asked with a serious expression, "What is a devil fruit?" His voice revealed curiosity about the unknown and a desire to explore. Chen Ye looked at Tony's serious face, took a deep breath, and began to explain the role and origin of the devil fruit. He described in detail the unique ability of the devil fruit and how it gave the eater extraordinary power. Everyone was shocked when they heard Chen Ye's story. They couldn't imagine that there was such a magical thing in the world that could give people such powerful power. After listening to Tony snatch the remaining shiny fruit from Pietro's hand, he carefully found a bag to put it in. Obviously, he planned to take it back for research. He was full of curiosity about the scientific principles of the devil fruit and hoped to unlock its secrets through research. At this time, Chen Ye interrupted everyone's meditation and hurriedly invited everyone to eat. The family sat in the restaurant, enjoying the food and warm atmosphere. Although they were shocked and curious about the existence of the devil fruit, they were more willing to cherish the happy time in front of them. At the table, everyone talked about various topics, and laughter and conversations came one after another. Chen Ye looked at the happy smiles of his family and felt extremely satisfied. He knew that no matter how the world changes, as long as the family is together, it is the greatest happiness. Chen Ye suddenly thought that something seemed to be missing today. "Damn Chen Ye, aren't you afraid that I will take it back?" Deadpool, who was still in the parallel universe, kicked over the trash can and complained. Middle East, Hydra's secret base. Crossbones walked steadily towards a huge freezer. His eyes were as sharp as a hawk, penetrating the transparent shell of the freezer and looking straight at the sleeping figure inside. He waved his hand, signaling his men. The man carried out his orders. With a slight mechanical roar, the lid of the cryostat slowly rose, revealing the sleeping person inside. It was a man called the Winter Soldier, who lay there quietly, as if time had no effect on him. There was no expression on his face, only a pair of deep eyes, revealing an indescribable coldness and determination. His long hair looked a little pale under the light of the cryostat, like a mountain covered with ice and snow. Crossbones walked in front of the Winter Soldier, looked down at him, and said coldly, "It's time to work, Winter Soldier." His voice was like an ice knife, cold and sharp. The Winter Soldier slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes met Crossbones, as if two sharp swords collided in the air. The Winter Soldier did not speak, but sat up silently and walked out of the cryostat. Although his movements were slow, they were full of power. Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Chen Ye's eyes slowly opened in the morning light. He felt a fresh air filling the room, as if foreshadowing a new day full of hope and vitality. He quickly got up, tidied himself, and then set out on the walk to Hell's Kitchen School. Chen Ye stood at the school gate, watching the students coming and going listlessly walk into the school gate for security check. Chen Ye walked up and saw that several men arranged by the high table were now standing at the door with AKs. They were currently searching the students, and Chen Ye curiously joined in. Several children of different ages were found to have dangerous items and were standing in the corner waiting for processing. Chen Ye took a pistol from the children and played with it. He asked the white boy in front of him, who was probably about 13 years old, "Why are you carrying a gun in class? What's your name? Which class are you from?" The white boy raised his head and said arrogantly, "Who are you?" "My name is James, and I'm from class 3, grade 8. This is not a real pistol. It's just a lighter." Several security guards from the High Table Society laughed when they heard it. As killers, how could they not know that this was a real pistol and lied that it was a lighter? Chen Ye also laughed when he heard it, loaded his gun, and then said to James, "Why don't I try to shoot and see if it comes out as fire or bullets?" James looked at Chen Ye in front of him and seemed to be really going to shoot, and began to shout for help to the security guard. "Hurry up, someone wants to kill students. I tell you, this is the school run by the Lord of Hell Chen Ye. No one can kill people at will in his territory." Chen Ye thought it was funny after hearing it, and he put down the gun. James saw Chen Ye put down the gun and thought he was scared, and said triumphantly, "I tell you, this is not a place for people like you to run wild." Chen Ye slapped him, and then kicked him twice. The kid was still a little unconvinced and stared at Chen Ye. Then don't you know that I am Chen Ye? Chen Ye smiled and looked at James, then he turned around and looked at the security guards of the High Table Club and ordered, "Go build a small dark room for me. If there are any more disobedient guys like this, throw them all into the small dark room for a day or two." Chen Ye walked and thought, whether he was too kind to these guys. He had to talk to Uncle Jean Bing about building a few small dark rooms and a few school mottos. When everyone knew that the person in front of them was the founder and honorary principal of the school, they didn't dare to say anything and went to accept the punishment honestly. At this time, Master Yi also came over and said to Chen Ye, "I didn't expect that I would finally meet the principal in person after almost a month of school opening." Chen Ye knew that he was in the wrong, but changed the subject and said, "I see that many children now walk to school, so hurry up and buy a few buses for the school." Master Yi replied, "It has been bought, but it will take some time to report to the government." Then Chen Ye pointed to the things found by the school security guards and said, "No, it's okay to have guns, but why can they also find marijuana and grenades? Whose child needs to bring grenades to school for self-defense?" Chen Ye estimated that these things were given by the children's parents. The parents of these children are drug dealers and arms dealers, and they have never thought that there is anything wrong with bringing these to school. Thinking of this, Chen Ye felt unhappy. Master Yi seemed to be used to it. He smiled and comforted him, "It's all going to change slowly. It's already pretty good. This used to be a reserve talent base for gangsters. Arms and drugs were sold here openly. It's already pretty good. Now 90% of the children in Hell's Kitchen have entered this school." Master Yi added, "How many people don't live in the dormitory now? Why do I see so many day students?" Chen Ye asked. "Currently, those who live in the dormitory are either orphans or from poor families. About 50% live in the school, and the rest go home." Master Yi explained. "Change it now. I want all students to live in the school and only go home on weekends. If the gangsters are dissatisfied, let them come to me. I don't see who dares to object." Chen Ye said with gritted teeth. Chen Ye is determined to change all this. If the students are allowed to go home, they will inevitably be corrupted by their gangster parents. Although Chen Ye has dealt with several larger gangs, the remaining as long as the gangs are not too excessive, Chen Ye will turn a blind eye. At this time, Jean Bing, another principal of Hell's Kitchen, also slowly walked in from the school gate. Seeing Chen Ye's gritting teeth, Jean Bing laughed and patted Chen Ye, who is so blind that he offended our honorary principal on the first day. "Let's talk in the office." Then he took Chen Ye to the principal's office. Chen Ye drank a sip of tea and began to ask, "What time does our school usually get out of school now?" Jean Bing looked at Chen Ye in confusion. "This is not according to the normal time. School is from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Jean Bing didn't expect that Chen Ye's first question after sitting down was such a basic question. The school time in the whole of America is like this. Does Chen Ye have any objection? Chen Ye looked at Jean Bing's expression and immediately understood his idea, but he did not explain. Instead, he said directly, "I think the children's study time is too short. I think it should be extended to 5 p.m., and then from 6 p.m., let them voluntarily participate in evening self-study until 10 p.m. After all, they have already studied later than ordinary students of the same age. If they don't work hard, they will be wasted." In fact, Chen Ye just couldn't bear to see them so comfortable. Thinking about his previous life, he had to go to school at 6 o'clock every day, read early at 7 o'clock, and was kept in class until 5 o'clock by the teacher. Evening self-study is nothing, and it can't go home until 10 o'clock. In comparison, the students in Hell's Kitchen are too leisurely. Chen Ye is worried that they may get into bad habits in their free time, such as taking drugs, or even playing with dangerous items such as pistols. As for evening self-study, Chen Ye believes that the students will study very consciously when they see the AKs in the hands of the security guards. Since the school cannot effectively manage them, Chen Ye decided to build a prison himself. He wanted to use an iron fist to ensure that students could devote themselves to learning. Jean Bing hesitated. "Anyway, this is your school, you have the final say. But if school ends so late, Vanessa may miss her children more. Chen Ye answered firmly, treat everyone equally. Uncle Jean Bing, you don't want your children to not be able to go to college. And I think there are still many places in the school that need to be modified. In this way, Chen Ye and Jean Bing talked about the school reform plan in the office for a whole day, until Master Yi knocked on the door and interrupted their discussion. He told Chen Ye that a guy named Frank Custer wanted to apply for the school's principal. He also knew that Chen Ye was in the school and hoped to meet him. Chen Ye heard that the name Frank Custer sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was for a while. However, when he heard that this person was actually applying for the school's principal, Chen Ye was still very interested. After all, many parents of children in this school are gangsters. If a bad student complained, he would be retaliated. Of course Chen Ye would not let this happen, but there are still many people who are afraid of being targeted by gangsters, so now Master Yi is the first to take this position, but both Chen Ye and Master Yi know that Master Yi is too intimidating, so Chen Ye decided to meet the man who applied for the job in person. Chapter 96. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Ye stood up and looked at Jean Bing. Jean Bing stood up and began to organize his things. He glanced at Chen Ye and said lightly, "Don't look at me. People called you by name. I have been with you for a day. I have to go back to see Vanessa, otherwise she will be angry." Chen Ye saw that Uncle Jean Bing was not interested, so he stopped forcing it. He understood that everyone had their own things to do, so he quickly asked Master Yi to lead the way. They walked through the corridor and came to another teacher's office. As soon as he entered another teacher's office, Chen Ye saw a man named Frank Custer. The man's eyes were not full of murderous intent, but numbness, as if he saw everyone as a corpse, and he felt like a numb killing machine. Chen Ye could tell at a glance that this man must have been a mercenary. No wonder this man dared to apply for the position of director of teaching. If any gangster parent dared to trouble him, he would probably be knocked down by this man in a few moves. Just as Chen Ye was about to step forward to introduce himself, Frank Custer suddenly stood up and knelt down in front of him. He kept saying thank you, as if he was grateful to Chen Ye. Chen Ye looked at Master Yi awkwardly and tried to find out what happened. Master Yi also shook his head to indicate that he didn't know. Then Chen Ye quickly helped Frank up, and then asked with concern, "What's wrong with you? Why are you thanking me? I don't remember helping you." Chen Ye was very sure that he had never helped the man in front of him. What could have made a murderer like him give him such a great gift? At this time, if Chen Ye opened the system interface, he would see a series of prompts. Congratulations to the host, Frank Custer has successfully added the host as a friend. Congratulations to the host, Frank Custer's favorability has been increased to 2 stars. Congratulations to the host. Congratulations to the host, Frank Custer's favorability has been increased to full stars. Congratulations to the host, 17/20ths are already family members. Frank stood up. He knew he had lost his composure, and then smiled bitterly and said, "You may not know me, but you should know Monroe, a child who is missing a left arm. He is a student here." After hearing this, Chen Ye looked at Master Yi in confusion. It was a shame that Chen Ye did not know the students in the school. After all, this was his first day at school. Master Yi nodded, and then asked Frank, "Yes, we do have a child named Monroe here, and he did lose his left arm. Who are you to him?" Then Master Yi said to Chen Ye, "This Monroe is also from the same orphanage as you, but he is much younger than you. Later, he joined the Vongala family and was sent here to study now that school has started." Chen Ye nodded as if he had an impression, and then looked at Frank. Could it be that this Monroe is his relative? Frank said to Chen Ye with gratitude, "This Monroe is my poor child. I have inquired about it during this period. If it weren't for you, Monroe might have died long ago. That damn orphanage." In Frank's eyes, Chen Ye is his god. If it weren't for Chen Ye, he might not have seen his child long ago. If it weren't for Chen Ye, his child wouldn't have been able to grow up safely in Hell's Kitchen and even have a school to go to. When Chen Ye heard Frank say that he was Monroe's father, he immediately said with a cold face, "Oh, you are his father, then what have you been doing all these years? Now you come to pretend to recognize your son. I will not let my students suffer any harm." Chen Ye did not think that Frank was a good person for coming back to recognize his child now. What had he been doing all these years? Frank did not feel any discomfort about Chen Ye's sudden change of attitude. Instead, he understood that Chen Ye was doing it for the good of the children. Frank sat on the stool and said in a low voice, "I used to be an officer in the Marine Corps of this country. I dedicated everything to this country, even my family and life." Frank covered his face and said, "I fought for the country on the front line, but my wife died in a gang fight, and my poor Monroe lost an arm. The damn federal government concealed everything from me and arranged for me to carry out a 3-year mission. What hurts me most is that the person I once thought was the best, also tried to conceal this matter and tried to prevent me from taking revenge. When I found out about this, I wiped out the entire family of the Italian mafia murderers. The law can't punish them, so I will. Then after a long investigation, I finally found my child here." After hearing all this, Chen Ye was sure that the man in front of him was the anti-hero Punisher of Hell's Kitchen. The Punisher's original name was Frank Custer. He was originally a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. After his family was killed by the underworld, he became the Punisher and retaliated against all evil forces, claiming that as long as you are guilty, you must die. Master Yi also nodded to show his understanding. If his daughter was also accidentally injured, he would probably make the same choice. Chen Ye had heard about this mafia family annihilation tragedy when he was working part-time. A total of 100 people, including servants, were all killed and stuffed into a grinder. After the incident, it was said that the meat was packed and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. There was no chance for people to be buried. Chen Ye was shocked for a while when he heard this. He didn't expect that the person in front of him was the ruthless man. Chen Ye was more and more satisfied. With Frank as a ruthless man, I wonder who dares not to study in the evening. Then Frank bowed to Chen Ye again. "Thank you, if it weren't for you, Monroe wouldn't be able to live like this now." Although he lost a hand, he didn't feel inferior, and people around him didn't discriminate against him. Chen Ye waved his hand. "I'm not as good as you say. Don't you hate gangs the most? Monroe was thrown into the gangs by me before. Don't you hate me? After all the members of the orphanage were assigned to the Vongala family before. If they didn't join the gangs at that time, there would be no place for these orphans." Frank shook his head. "I know about the Vongala family. The Vongala family is different from ordinary gangs. They are just trying to survive and have never done anything harmful to the world." Frank knew that if it weren't for the Vongala family, his child Monroe might have starved to death right after leaving the orphanage. Although Frank hated the gangs, he did not hate the Vongala family. Instead, he was very grateful, and Flock agreed with Chen Ye's idea of building a school for Hell's Kitchen, so he chose to apply. On the one hand, he could see his children, and on the other hand, he could repay Chen Ye for saving his son's life. Chen Ye looked at Frank with admiration in his eyes. He nodded, indicating that he understood Frank's decision. Then he stretched out his hand to shake hands with Frank and said sincerely, "Well, welcome to join, Frank. I hope you can supervise these students well, let them cherish this opportunity and study hard." Frank also stood up and shook hands with Chen Ye. There was a firm light in his eyes, as if he had seen those students gradually moving towards a bright future with the help of Chen Ye and him. "By the way, can you tell me who your friend who betrayed you is? Are you going to take revenge?" Chen Ye seemed to have remembered something and asked. Frank didn't expect Chen Ye to ask this question, but he still answered honestly, "Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side of the city, Jean Bing and his wife Vanessa had just finished a pleasant shopping trip and were driving home. The neon lights of the city flickered in the night, and the trees on both sides of the street swayed gently in the breeze. Everything seemed so peaceful and warm. However, this tranquility did not last long. Suddenly, a huge truck rushed into their sight without warning, like a beast out of control, rushing straight towards them without any intention of braking. Jean Bing felt something was wrong and quickly used his superpowers to turn himself into Diamond and lie in front of Vanessa. With a loud bang, the truck hit Jean Bing's car hard. The impact was so great that the driver died on the spot. However, Kingpin's diamond body withstood the impact intact. For a moment, The car was full of flames and smoke, then a man in black clothes and a black mask jumped out of the truck. This man was the Winter Soldier. He glanced at the car that was smashed beyond recognition, with no expression on his face. In his opinion, such a mission was commonplace for him. The Winter Soldier didn't know that Kingpin had superpowers. He felt that Kingpin and Vanessa, as ordinary people, could not survive this impact, so he made a phone call. The target of the mission has died, and the mission is completed. On the other end of the conversation, Crossbones roared angrily, "I want to capture them alive, capture them alive. I didn't ask you to kill them." That the Winter Soldier hung up the phone nonchalantly. For him, the only option for the mission target was death, and there was no other option. Besides, 30 years ago, he also killed a target with a car. The target was called Stark. The Winter Soldier shook his head, and then turned around and left with peace of mind after watching the car explode. However, he did not realize that this mission was completely different from that 30 years ago. Suddenly, a deafening roar exploded behind the Winter Soldier, making his eardrums buzz. He immediately turned his head reflexively, and the scene in front of him made him dumbfounded and unbelievable. I saw a man with a dazzling body, as if made of diamonds, rushing out of the blazing fire, holding an unconscious woman tightly in his arms. The man called Kingpin. His eyes were full of anger and grief. He gently put Vanessa on the ground, gently comforted Vanessa, then shot his eyes at the Winter Soldier like a knife, and roared, "Do you think I'm easy to bully now that I'm retired? One or two of you want to kill me and my family." That his voice was like thunder, shocking. Kingpin was very angry at this moment, and a little fortunate that Chen Ye gave him the shining fruit. If he was still an ordinary person, he might have died this time. If Chen Ye gave him another fruit, maybe Kingpin might be fine, but Vanessa might not be alive. It seems that he has retired recently and is too relaxed. If it were not possible before, this kind of thing would not have happened. The most important thing is that his own Vanessa almost died in front of him once, which made him very angry. The expressionless look of the Winter Soldier for many years finally changed at this moment, and his pupils were shocked. I never expected that Kingpin was also different from what was shown in the intelligence. The intelligence clearly showed that Kingpin was just an ordinary person. At this moment, in a hidden monitoring room, Director Pierce was watching all this through the camera on the Winter Soldier. His face was livid, and he pounded the table angrily, shouting, "What's going on? Why is this Kingpin also a superpower? What is our intelligence department doing?" That the intelligence department personnel lowered their heads and dared not breathe. An intelligence officer who didn't know whether to live or die tried to explain. According to previous intelligence, Kingpin is indeed an ordinary person. However, before he finished speaking, Pierce suddenly pulled out a pistol and shot him on the spot. Pierce glanced at the remaining intelligence officers angrily and said coldly, "I don't want to listen to explanations, I only look at the results. If there is a next time, the person in front of you will be your fate. Let the Winter Soldier retreat quickly." His voice was full of coldness and determination. The whole room fell into silence, leaving only the cold voice of Director Pierce echoing in the air. The intelligence officers looked at each other, their hearts filled with fear and uneasiness. "Maybe it's too late." Krosku pointed at the screen and said, at this time, Kingpin had turned into a diamond body and rushed towards the Winter Soldier at an astonishing speed. The huge force made the Winter Soldier feel that his internal organs were about to be shaken out. He could not resist this force and could only watch himself being knocked away. The intelligence officers were filled with despair. They knew that if Kingpin really defeated the Winter Soldier, then their mission would be a complete failure. They could not imagine what kind of punishment Director Pierce would give them. The fear made them almost unable to breathe. At this time, the Winter Soldier had been knocked to the ground by Kingpin. He struggled painfully and tried to get himself up. However, Kingpin's power became extremely powerful after he turned into diamond, making the Winter Soldier. I felt as if my body was about to fall apart. Winter Soldier had mixed feelings. He had long expected that one day he might fail in his mission or even be killed, but he never thought that this day would come so soon. He lay on the cold ground and could only watch Kingpin approach him step by step, his heart full of helplessness and despair. Kingpin walked to Winter Soldier, grabbed his neck and lifted him up. A cruel smile appeared on his face, as if he had seen the fate of Winter Soldier's imminent death. Winter Soldier's eyes were full of unwillingness, but he could not break free from Kingpin's restraints. At the same time, this scene on the screen was seen by Director Pierce. He quickly pointed at Crossbones and said, "Quick, call Winter Soldier. Remember not to reveal our identities." Although Director Pierce had planned to let Winter Soldier die at the hands of Chen Ye's forces, he couldn't help but feel a little distressed when he saw Winter Soldier was about to be killed. After all, super dead soldiers like Winter Soldier are extremely precious resources. Crossbones was helpless when he heard Director Pierce's order. "You are going to kill someone, and you want people to show mercy. Isn't this a dream?" But his hands did not slow down at all, and he quickly took out his mobile phone and called. At this time, Kingpin was not going to ask who the assassin was, and he just wanted to kill him quickly. Just then the phone rang, and Kingpin took the phone out of Winter Soldier's body. He guessed that it was the call from the person behind Winter Soldier. Kingpin grabbed Winter Soldier's neck with one hand and answered the phone with the other hand. Only the voice of Crossbones came from the other end of the phone. "If I say this is all a misunderstanding, do you believe it? We can make compensation, please let him go." Chapter 98. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two of them were in a state of panic. Compensation? I don't need those hypocritical compensations. I only ask him to pay with his life. Kingpin said coldly, with a cruel and cold smile on his lips. Before Crossbones on the other end of the phone could say the next word, Kingpin had already taken action without hesitation. He pinched the Winter Soldier's neck hard, as if he was crushing a tiny insect. Winter Soldier, a soldier who had experienced the test of life and death in World War II, thought he had seen all the death and horror, but he never expected that he would end his life here in this way. His eyes were wide open, full of reluctance and astonishment, as if saying, "How is this possible? You actually killed the Winter Soldier, we will not let you go." Crossbones looked at the scene of the Winter Soldier's death on the screen and made a harsh remark. However, for Kingpin, such a threat was just a deaf ear. He crushed the phone in his hand carelessly, and the fragments of the phone scattered all over the ground, making a crisp sound. Then, he sneered and said, "Winter Soldier, I will go to you personally." After that, he turned around and left without hesitation with Vanessa. Their figures gradually disappeared in the night, leaving only the lifeless body of the Winter Soldier and the fragments of the phone scattered all over the ground. Director Pierce witnessed the whole process on the surveillance screen. Seeing the death of Winter Soldier, an excellent warrior, at the hands of Kingpin, he took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes and ordered, "Go and show Nick Fury the body of Winter Soldier and this video without leaving any trace. We don't need to do the rest." The intelligence officers present thought that Director Pierce was sad about the death of Winter Soldier. They lowered their heads and dared not speak. However, they did not know that Director Pierce was full of joy and expectation at this moment. His hand trembled slightly as he rubbed his eyes, and the corners of his mouth began to rise, as if he had seen that the battle between the Avengers and Chen Ye was about to break out. Crossbones, who heard the order, quickly began to command the people below to start working. The scene was very quiet, and no one dared to speak, for fear of angering the unhappy Director Pierce. The next day, Chen Ye got up early in the morning and learned from Wanda that Uncle Kingpin was attacked and the Winter Soldier died. Chen Ye, who was not fully awake, woke up instantly. This news shocked him. It seems that Captain America's favorability cannot be improved, but Chen Ye does not particularly like Captain America. If they are not on the same path, there is no need to force them to know each other for the sake of the system. At present, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. does not know this news, but it is estimated that it will soon, and they have to prepare to fight with the Avengers. At present, the Avengers only have Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and at most Captain Marvel. There are only a few of the first generation of Avengers. Chen Ye has not seen the Green Fat Man yet, and Thor has not come to the world yet. Such an Avengers is not to be feared. Then Chen Ye sneered. That Pierce is not a good bird. He talked about cooperation with him the day before yesterday, and then he couldn't wait to send people to kill the people around Chen Ye. Chen Ye was not worried that Tony would join the Avengers because Tony was already his family. Even if he joined, Chen Ye would tell Tony who killed his parents, and Chen Ye believed that Tony would immediately quit the Avengers. At this time, Chen Ye did not know that in order to deal with Chen Ye, Nick Fury not only brought in the Fantastic Four, but also spent a lot of money to invite Professor X and his X-Men, as well as the imprisoned Purple Man. Trident building of S.H.I.E.L.D. At this time, director Nick Fury was taking Tony to visit S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the headquarters of our shield, and your father is also one of the founders here. Nick Fury proudly introduced to Tony. Tony listened to Nick Fury's introduction, nodded mechanically, and then said to Nick, "Hurry up and give me the things my father left behind. I am not interested in anything here. Don't worry, we sincerely invite you to join the Avengers to resist force majeure." Black Egg said slowly, Nick really wants Tony to join. On the one hand, Tony's father is the founder, and on the other hand, Tony is really rich. As long as he joins S.H.I.E.L.D., he can use the name of the Avengers to make money crazily. I'm not interested in joining. What Superboy are you talking about? I just want to take back what my dad left me. Tony said seriously. If Tony hadn't heard the black boiled egg in front of him say that his dead father had left something for him, he would not have dealt with this person in front of him. Tony, who has seen countless people, can see at a glance that the black boiled egg in front of him is insidious and cunning and is a difficult politician. I know that you are dying now. As long as you join us, we will have a way to help you solve it. The black boiled egg looked mysterious, because in his understanding, the small square pile on Iron Man's chest threatened his health all the time. Because the core of the reactor is palladium, it can provide a lot of energy and a lot of toxins. He thought he had grasped Tony's lifeline and looked like he was sure of victory. After hearing what the black boiled egg said, Tony sneered, "Give me my father's things right now, or I will turn around and leave." Under the nourishment of the magic beans given by Chen Ye, Tony Stark's body has long recovered to its peak state, even healthier than before. Not only that, Chen Ye also generously gave him a new elemental blueprint, which enabled Tony to research more advanced technology. Now, the small square pile on his body is his latest masterpiece, which contains powerful energy and endless possibilities. Therefore, when the black salted egg appeared in front of him and spoke in a threatening tone, Tony only felt that the man in front of him was bluffing. He smiled at the black salted egg, full of confidence in his heart. "Aren't you afraid of death?" The black salted egg's voice was full of doubts and surprise. Tony smiled lightly. "Who told you that I would die? If you curse me again, believe it or not, I will sue you for defamation." Black Egg frowned after hearing this. He didn't understand where he went wrong. He had clearly found out about Tony's physical condition and knew that he had been seriously injured, but Tony in front of him was so confident, as if everything was under his control. He led Tony into the deepest meeting room. Just when Tony was about to lose his patience, Black Egg opened the door of the meeting room, then turned to Tony and said, "Welcome to the Avengers." Tony saw the Black Widow and Hawkeye he knew before, as well as the Captain America he saw a long time ago in the conference room. In addition, Tony saw several people he didn't know. One of them was a bald man sitting in a wheelchair, with wisdom in his eyes, as if he was a scientist or a wise man. The other was a middle-aged man in a doctor's uniform, who was chatting with the bald man with a gentle smile on his face. What surprised Tony the most was that he saw 3 people wearing the same blue uniforms and a stone man chatting. There was a striking 4 logo on their uniforms, which immediately reminded Tony of the legendary Fantastic Four. In this conference room, everyone exuded a strong aura. They all had different abilities and backgrounds, but they all chose to stand here and work hard for the same goal. Chapter 99. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone's eyes were focused on the new Tony. Nick Fury felt very satisfied when he saw Tony's shocked expression. God knows how much energy he spent and how much benefit he exchanged to form this alliance. However, seeing that Tony, a playboy who has seen the world, was shocked, Nick Fury felt that it was worth it no matter how hard he worked. Black Egg said to Tony confidently, "Join us, Tony." He believed that with Tony's talent and strength, he would definitely become a great help to the Avengers. Black Egg felt that Tony would definitely agree to the invitation at this time. Tony admitted that he was shocked by the Avengers when he came in, but he soon calmed down. He said, "This is your Superboy team." There was a hint of ridicule and contempt in his tone. Tony ignored the question of the black salted egg, walked towards the American Captain Steve, and said slowly, "I didn't expect that you, an old antique, are still alive." Steve looked at the unruly Tony in front of him and said, "I know your father, Howard, he is a good man." He stretched out his hand to shake hands with Tony, but Tony ignored his hand and continued to move forward. Tony's next target is the bald old man in a wheelchair. He walked up to him and asked with a smile, "I don't know what this gentleman's name is." Shield doesn't even let the elderly go now. Although his tone was teasing, his eyes were very serious. He intuitively felt that the person in front of him was the most threatening, and his eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. The bald old man did not answer his question immediately, but looked at him with deep eyes. This look made Tony feel a little uncomfortable, and he felt as if he was seen through. However, he did not retreat, but stared at the other party more firmly. "You can call me Charles or Professor X, don't worry, I'm just an unarmed old man and I can't pose a threat to you." Charles looked at Tony with a smile, as if he had seen through Tony's mind. Tony understood that the man in front of him was Charles, one of the leaders of the mutants. Hearing that Professor X could see through people's hearts, Tony decided to go back and build a battle armor that could block the prying of the mind. At this moment, the man in blue clothes walked towards Tony and introduced himself. "Hello, my name is Reed Richards, and it's nice to see you again, Mr. Stark." Reed Richards is Mr. Fantastic and the captain of the Fantastic Four. During a space mission, his body structure was changed by cosmic rays, so that his body could change into any shape according to his will. The other members are Invisible Woman, who can be invisible, fly, and emit energy shock waves to create energy shields. The other two members are his good friend, the Stone Man, who is extremely strong and tough, and is also the mascot of the Fantastic Four. The other is the Invisible Woman's brother, the Human Torch, whose body can produce flames and fly, and when the body surface temperature is the highest, it is the same as a supernova. Tony glanced at Richards, and Tony's superiority made Richards, a smart man, feel frustrated, but he didn't show it. "I know you, that's the one whose reputation is well known in the investment circle," Tony said. Richards thought Tony was praising her, and was about to be humble when he was interrupted by Tony's next words. "Your project is a loss for every investment, which is simply a nightmare in our circle. In my opinion, any project in my mind can make a lot of money. How do you make every project lose money? In a sense, you are also a genius." Tony teased. A real villain like Tony looked down on hypocrites like Richards. He thought that although Richards was smart, he didn't use the right path, but used the crooked path. When Richards heard Tony's sarcasm, the smile on Richards' face froze, but he couldn't show his face as he always maintained a gentlemanly image. But he was already thinking about how to make Tony suffer. The hot-tempered Human Torch heard Tony mocking his teammates, and his whole body was on fire and he was about to cause trouble for Tony, but he was immediately stopped by his sister Susan, the Invisible Woman, with a look at him. Wow, may I ask, this young man with a body full of fire, Captain America, is your father?" Tony immediately started to tease the Human Torch again. It's no wonder he said that. The main reason is that the Human Torch looks exactly like Steve. This sentence also directly angered the Invisible Woman Susan. She didn't expect Tony to be so rude, and the always gentle Steve also glared at Tony. He couldn't stand Tony's insult to his teammates. The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became tense and full of gunpowder. "Enough, Tony, answer me, do you want to join or not?" Nick Fury finally spoke this time. Tony immediately refused. "I refuse, I am not interested in joining your Superboy. Remember to send me my father's things." Then Tony immediately left the Avengers meeting room. The reason why Tony refused so straightforwardly was because he had already realized that the first target of the Avengers formed by Black Sauce Egg was definitely Chen Ye from Hell's Kitchen. Tony himself did not realize that his heart had unconsciously leaned towards Chen Ye's camp. At this moment, Tony began to think about whether Chen Ye's camp could beat the Avengers. Ordinary people like Hawkeye and Natasha were not to be feared, and Chen Ye's killers could handle it. Then there were the Fantastic Four. Tony said that he would come to deal with Mr. Fantastic. Tony didn't know why he hated Mr. Fantastic in his heart. Others just leave a few to Deadpool and the little girl next to Chen Ye. In Tony's mind, he has simulated such battle scenes countless times, and the result is always that Chen Ye's side wins. This made him feel relieved a little, as if he saw the dawn of victory. However, what Tony didn't know was that there was a more powerful force hidden in the Avengers, Captain Marvel. Tony was about to tell Chen Ye about the news of the Avengers when he saw Chen Ye calling him. "Hey, Chen Ye, I just wanted to find you," Tony said. Chen Ye on the other end of the phone said in surprise, "What a coincidence, I just wanted to find you, and I want to tell you a good news and a bad news." Tony hated the Riddler the most, and was also curious about what good news Chen Ye would have about him. tell me what the good news is. On the other end of the phone, Chen Ye's tone suddenly became serious. The good news is that I found the murderer who killed your parents. Tony's heart skipped a beat, and he could hardly hold the phone steady. He widened his eyes, his voice full of shock. How is it possible? My parents didn't die in a car accident. This news was too shocking for Tony. He had always believed that his parents died in an ordinary car accident. If what Chen Ye said was true, it meant that he had let the real murderer get away with it for more than 20 years, and he himself knew nothing about it. Tony was eager to know more details. He felt that he needed more information to digest this shocking news. He decided to go to Chen Ye in person. Face-to-face conversation would be clearer than on the phone. Tony took a deep breath, and then said like squeezing toothpaste, "Wait for me. I'll be there soon." Then he hung up the phone. Chapter 100. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soon, Tony came to Chen Ye's restaurant in Hell's Kitchen. Tony, anxious to know the truth, ignored John Wick's greeting and rushed into the restaurant. John Wick put down his hand to greet him. He didn't expect to see Tony so anxious one day. Maybe Tony had something urgent to find Chen Ye. If it was Pietro, he might have followed him in curiously, but John Wick himself was not such a gossipy person, so he didn't care and continued to sit in a daze. As soon as Tony entered the room, he slapped Chen Ye's desk and asked, "What happened? Didn't my parents die in a car accident?" Chen Ye was drinking tea calmly at this time. He looked up at Tony, who looked anxious, and said, "Take off your armor quickly, don't step on my floor." Chen Ye didn't know what Tony was anxious about. After all, this matter had happened for so long, and he didn't refuse to say it, but he had to fly over to tell him in person. Chen Ye thought that Tony in his previous life knew the truth but didn't kill the Winter Soldier. Now Uncle Kingpin has killed the Winter Soldier, and Tony still has to thank him. Tony looked at Chen Ye, who was drinking tea calmly there, and at this time he wanted to put a gun on Chen Ye's head and let him tell it quickly. "Didn't I tell you that I found the murderer who killed your parents? Ask Jarvis to check it out. I remember there is a video in S.H.I.E.L.D. that records the death of your parents." Chen Ye said. After hearing what Chen Ye said, Tony was about to rush home to find Jarvis to check the evidence. He couldn't wait to know the truth. If it was true, he swore to make the murderer pay the price. Chen Ye saw that Tony was about to rush away again, so Chen Ye quickly stopped him and said, "Wait a minute, didn't I say there was another bad news for you?" Tony paused, and he turned his head, his eyes full of doubts and confusion. He looked at Chen Ye, as if asking, "Is there any worse news than knowing the truth about my parents' murder?" Chen Ye saw this and said directly, "The murderer who killed your parents has been killed by Uncle Jean Bing. He wanted to kill Uncle Jean Bing and his wife the same way he killed your parents yesterday, but he was killed in return." Hearing this news, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then an inexplicable sense of loss surged into his heart. He felt that his anger and impulse were like a flame that was suddenly extinguished, and it was extinguished in an instant. The murderer he was looking for was actually dead. His anger and impulse seemed to have lost their target. Then Tony looked at Chen Ye in confusion, wanting to know the whole incident, so Chen Ye began to tell the whole incident in detail, starting from the attack of Kingpin's family by Winter Soldier, to the revelation of Winter Soldier's identity, and then to the truth of his parents' murder. He described every detail as clearly and accurately as possible. After hearing all the truth, Tony looked at Chen Ye with some doubts and shock. He didn't expect the truth of his parents' death to be like this. There was still a trace of doubt in his heart. Before he saw the evidence with his own eyes, Tony would not completely believe the truth of the facts, but Tony also believed that Chen Ye had no need to joke with him. What shocked Tony was that Chen Ye in front of him knew everything that even his own son didn't know, as if there was nothing he didn't know in Chen Ye's world. Tony looked at Chen Ye, his heart full of doubts and shock. He really couldn't understand why Chen Ye knew so much about his parents, things that even his own son didn't know. In Chen Ye's world, it seemed that there was nothing he didn't know, which made Tony feel deeply frustrated. Chen Ye looked at Tony and showed a mysterious smile. "How can I tell you that I am a time traveler and know everything?" Seeing Chen Ye's annoying smile, Tony was furious, but he suddenly thought of something, which made him feel like getting back at the right time. Tony showed a sly smile and said to Chen Ye, "There is one thing you definitely don't know." Chen Ye looked at Tony with curiosity in his eyes. He wanted to know what Tony was going to say. Was there anything else he didn't know? Tony smiled triumphantly. and then said, "Do you know what I saw in S.H.I.E.L.D. today?" Then Tony deliberately kept it a secret. He wanted to see Chen Ye's expectant and curious eyes. Tony wanted to tell Chen Ye what he had done today. The Avengers he saw told Chen Ye that he believed Chen Ye definitely didn't know that Nick Fury had formed the Avengers. Chen Ye instantly understood that Tony was invited by Black Egg to join the Avengers today. Chen Ye knew Tony's temper. He was not convinced and wanted to get back at him. Chen Ye did not show any surprise or curiosity. He just said lightly, "Avengers." Tony's pupils dilated instantly. He didn't expect Chen Ye to even know about the Avengers. This made him feel very surprised and frustrated. He felt like a clown in front of Chen Ye. However, Tony did not show it. He stood up and said goodbye to Chen Ye. "I have to go back and check the evidence first. If it is true, I will send those who cover up the truth to hell one by one." Avengers base. Nick Fury was chatting with the members of the Avengers at this time. Coulson walked towards Director Fury with a serious face and whispered a few words in his ear. The Avengers did not hear what Coulson said, but saw that Director Fury's face suddenly became serious. At this time, Black Egg heard the news about the death of Bucky, the Winter Soldier, and was still struggling whether to tell Captain America Steve, because it was strange everywhere. Why did Bucky, who had not appeared for many years, suddenly appear, and why did he die as soon as he appeared? Why did the news of death reach S.H.I.E.L.D.? Is there a conspiracy? The Avengers who were doing their own things on the side also felt that something was wrong with Director Fury, and they all stopped what they were doing and looked at Director Fury. Black Egg slowly walked towards Steve. Steve didn't know what was going on at this time, and smiled and said to Fury, "Why are you suddenly so upset? Is there something wrong?" That when Steve heard the news about his friend Bucky, the joy in his heart almost overflowed. After all, for someone like him who has been sleeping for decades, all the familiar people around him have left him, and he is trying to adapt to this new world. Suddenly hearing that his good friend Bucky is still alive, Steve's excitement cannot be described in words. He couldn't wait to find Bucky, and didn't notice the solemn expression of Black Egg at all. Steve grabbed Black Egg's shoulder excitedly and asked eagerly, "Where is Bucky? Is he doing well?" His eyes flashed with expectation and hope, as if as long as Black Egg said the good news, he could see Bucky immediately. However, Black Egg looked at Steve with excitement, and slowly said, "Steve, calm down, I'm sorry to tell you that Bucky is dead." This sentence was like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering Steve's hope. Steve, who was just happy, heard the news of Bucky's death, and the smile on his face disappeared instantly, replaced by astonishment and pain. He couldn't accept this fact. He couldn't believe that Bucky, who always fought by his side, was gone like this. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Steve's voice was full of pain and despair, and his body was shaking slightly.